Hello everybody. This will be a video for the X1 project. So the X1 project has to do with translation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call up the set of instructions that we looked at earlier at the slides that I went over in class. So if we take a look at the slides, I'm going to quickly scroll down to the project that we're talking about, the XLIFF-DITA project. So I've already made videos for D1 and D2 and D3. So this will be the video for X1. Okay, there's D3. We've already done that. Okay, so for X1, the XLIFF-DITA Open Toolkit plugin. The steps required are for you to install the DITA Open Toolkit, which you've already done, and to install the DITA-XLIFF round trip plugin from D to L. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. So first of all, I will call up D to L. And I will go to course content, and I will go to resource files tab, and I will scroll down to the XLIFF plugins, and I will download. And it will ask me where do I want to download, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in my DITA class directory. I've made a directory called downloads. You can do this however you'd like, but this works for me, so I'll save it to that directory. Okay, and when the file shows up in that directory, I will go to that directory. There it is. Okay. And I will go into my downloads directory. And I will find the file that I just downloaded. And this is the same procedure in Mac or Windows. I right-click and I say extract all. I think in Windows it says something, excuse me, in Mac it says something different, I don't recall, but I'm just going to let it extract to the where I have it defaulted here. I'm going to go ahead and click extract, and it will extract these files right here in the downloads directory. You can do whatever is most comfortable for you, but this works just fine for me. And as the extraction completes, it will create a directory that's called XLIFF plugins. And when it completes the XLIFF plugins directory, we'll go into that directory. And we will find an XLIFF plugins directory, and in there we will find two directories. Sometimes these are called folders. I know that sometimes the thing that I call, or the jargon that I use is a bit confusing. So just grab both of these. I'm highlighting them both, and then I'm going to copy them both. I will do in Windows Control C. I believe in Mac it's Command C, but you want to get them onto your clipboard. And then I'm going to go into my DITA class directory, and I'm going to look for the place where I've installed the DITA Open Toolkit, the PSU DITA Open Toolkit. Okay, so I navigate to that directory, and I look for my plugins directory. And I find my plugins directory, and I go into it, And then I'm just going to paste these in this directory. So I'm going to, in Windows, say Control V. On the Mac, it would be Command V. And it's going to put each of these directories into my plugins directory. Okay, so there they are. I've got my DITA from XLIFF v2 and my XLIFF v2. So now I'll go back into my Open Toolkit directory, and I will look at my instructions. And it says that after I install the XLIFF-DITA round-trip plugin from D to L, which I just did, I need to translate the guitars project. I need to transform it to XLIFF. I need to pseudo translate it, and I'll show you how to do that. And then I need to transform it back to DITA, and I need to compile the translated DITA to PDF, and I need to compile the translated DITA to HTML or XHTML. And the evaluation for this is that every step is worth 2 points for a total of 10 points. Then when you're done, you need to email the translated XLIFF to me, and then zip the email the translated XLIFF to me, and I'll demonstrate how to do that. And then zip the PDF and the HTML output directories and email those to me. Okay, so this is the part we just went over. And I'm going to, this is important, make sure that the out directory is empty before creating XLIFF, and I'll demonstrate how to do that. The first thing we need to do is to navigate to the sample directory so that we can become familiar with that XLIFF, that DITA project. So that comes with the software. So if I go into plugins and I go into XLIFF v2, first I'm going to look in this out and make sure the out directory is empty. It's got this in here, but that's harmless. I'm just going to delete it. Okay. And then I'm going to go into back into my XLIFF v2 directory, and I'm going to look into samples. And I'm going to notice that I have 3 samples here. The one that we're interested in is called guitars. So I'll just take a look in that. And indeed, guitars has a map, and it's got tasks and images and DTDs and concepts. So for example, if we look into concepts, we have several concept files having to do with guitars and so forth. If we look into my tasks directory, similarly, we have a few tasks having to do with guitars. So I'm going to go back to my PSU DITA Open Toolkit directory. I'm satisfied that there's a DITA sample file there that installed properly. So the next step is I'm going to invoke the DITA Open Toolkit. If I'm in Windows, I simply have to go to my startcommand.bat file and double-click. If I'm in the Mac, I need to call up a command prompt, change directories to the PSU DITA Open Toolkit directory, and then I need to type sh space startcmd.sh. Hopefully you've done this many times by now, so that particular step won't be difficult for you. So after I've double-clicked, in this case in Windows, I'm going to just press Enter. It tells us that this is the patched version, and this is the version that we're supposed to use for this class. So I press Enter, and it brings up the DITA Open Toolkit enabled command line. So this is probably familiar to you from what you've done in the past. So from here, I'm going to change directory to plugins, Enter, and I'm going to change directory to XLIFF-v2, Enter. Okay, so I'm in the right place. If you're in the Mac, you can do a PWD to print working directory, or if you're in the Windows, it actually shows you the directory that you're in at the command line prompt there. So everything looks good. So I'm going to do in Windows dir to show me what files are in there. If you were in Apple, you'd do an ls, and it would show you which files are in there. The file that I'm interested in here is build_dita-XLIFF.xml. So this will be the first project where we don't use the DITA command, but we actually have to use the ant command. So in this case, I type ANT space -F space BUILD underscore DITA 2 XLIFF.xml, and I hit enter. And the ant command may show us a few warnings that we really don't have to worry about, but it'll go through all of the exercises. The ant command will look at the ant build file that I just referred to. It will find in the ant build file that the build file is pointed to that map that we just looked at in the guitars sample directory. It's going to then interrogate the map, and it's going to find each of the topics that is referred to in the map, and it's going to weave all of those together and transform them into an XLIFF file. Remember, we said that it's important to give your localization service provider an XLIFF file rather than throwing hundreds of topics and maps over the wall and asking them to do the translation. So the other thing that's going on here is that the build file is telling the Open Toolkit to create a PDF file. It's always good to include a PDF file for the translator's reference. So it gave us the build successful message, so that's a good sign. So we'll go into the plugins directory and see if it made what we wanted it to make. Okay, and here we are in XLIFF v2, and we look into our out directory, into samples and XLIFF, and we see that we have a PDF file. I'm just going to go ahead and double click it. And we see that it made the PDF file as expected. This is a very old project. I think I only refer to 3 of my guitars here. I think if I look over my shoulder while I'm making this video, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guitars now. So, but anyway, this is a good practice project. So it made the PDF file, but more importantly, it made this XLIFF file called d_x.xml. So we can look at this in our text editor. In this case, since I'm in Windows, I pulled up Notepad++, and I'm just going to look at this XLIFF file, and this will tell me a little bit about how XLIFF files work. So what an XLIFF file does is, like I said, it took all of that information from the map file, and it found all of the topics, all of the subsequent map files, and even the images, and it put those into each of those into the XLIFF file element. And then there's a skeleton. The skeleton holds all of the information that the DITA Open Toolkit needs to put the file back together when we transform it back into DITA. But from a translator's point of view, what it did is it created these units, and the units are where the translations take place. So for example, if you send this to the localization service provider, the nice thing is that they can open this natively with their computer-aided translation tools. Those tools like XLIFF files, and then their tool will show what the source text is, and the translator will be then expected to translate in the target area. So this is a view of this file in Notepad, but there are also tools that are computer-aided translation tools that offer a much nicer interface for the translator. This is a tool that I wrote. It's different than some of the other tools that I've written because it has a graphical user interface. I would be happy to provide this tool to you. Basically what you do with this tool is you open the XLIFF file. You can do a lot of things. You can apply translation memory, you can look at your glossary and so forth. But for this I'm just going to open the XLIFF file. I'm going to go to my desktop. Oops. And I'm going to go into my DITA directory. And I'll go into PSU. I'll go into plugins. By the way, you don't have to do these steps. I'm going to show you a much easier way, but this is just to demonstrate how XLIFF files are edited or translated by actual translators. So I'll go into my out directory, in my samples directory, in my XLIFF directory, and I will change this to all files. So I see that I have my D2X file there. If I open this with a translators tool, I see that I get this XLIFF file, and I could do things like attach translation memory, terms, change tracking, etc. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead. I'll zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so in this case, I'm actually just going to translate. So I'll hit the translate button, and it will bring up the first trans unit. Let's see here. It's showing on my other screen, so I'm going to drag it over here in just a second here. Okay, so in this case, it pulls up that first unit. So what I could do is I could actually translate this to German. In this case, I'm just going to put a little ZZZZ dash, and I'm going to be done. I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see that. And this is to just show you what a translator would do. They wouldn't really type in ZZZ, I love my guitars. They would type in the French or Japanese or whatever target language it needed to be. So now I'll just say that I'm done. And it says, do I want to overwrite that file? So I'll say yes. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. So if it's, Notepad++ noticed that it was edited by another program. Do I want to reload it? I'll say yes. And it put in the Z-ish translation. So I'm going to go back to my instructions here. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I just wanted to show how that tool works. You will not be required to use that tool. I'm going to show you a much easier way. But I'll go back to my instructions here. Okay, so we've done this step. We've done this. We've done this. And we're observing these files. We saw that the PDF file was there. We saw the XLIFF file is there. And I showed you how to do a translation using the tool that I just showed you. But there's an easier way, and this is what I'm going to recommend that you do. Do a find and replace, and search for the exact text angle, T-A-R-G-E-T angle, and replace it with the same angle, T-A-R-G-E-T angle, but then put a Z-Z-Z-Z dash, and that will be your pseudo translation. You don't have to put Z-Z-Z dash, but just put something that will show me that you've imitated the translation here. So I'm going to do that. So I'll go here. Actually, I'm going to go after my first target, and then I'm going to say search find, and I'm going to type angle, T-A-R-G-E-T close angle, and I'm going to hit my replace, and I'm going to say angle, T-A-R-G-E-T angle, and then I'm going to type Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z dash, and I'm going to say replace all. So what that did is everywhere that it found a target, it left the source strings just fine as they are, and it did a pseudo translation, simulated a translation by saying that in Z-ish the translation for these are my guitars is ZZZZZ dash these are my guitars. Hopefully that's understandable by everybody. So I'm going to save that. Okay, so now I have a translated file, and I'll put this away, and I'll look in my instructions for the next step. And the next step is to transform the pseudo translated XLIFF file back to DITA. Copy the file from that we just translated into this other plugins directory and call it this DX translated XML. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to put this on my clipboard. Okay, actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to take this file then, and I'm going to copy it. So in Windows, I do Control C, and then I'm going to change directories back into plugins, and I'm going to go into my DITA from XLIFF, and I'm going to first of all make sure that there's nothing in my out directory. Okay, that's good. I'll just delete this. And then I'm going to go into back into DITA from XLIFF v2 and go into my in directory, and I'm going to paste Control V for Windows, Command V for Apple, and I'm going to change this file name. This is the one we just translated. I'm going to change its file name to the file name that it says in the slide, which I'm going to remind myself was oh, that's interesting. I must have closed that file, so I will in the background quickly go get it. Okay, bear with me for just one moment here. As I always like to say, unless I do something terribly egregious, I'm just going to keep it rolling and get that slide. I believe that was it class 4? I think it was. Yeah, okay. So let's go back down to where we were into X1. We were on this slide. Oops. Not in the right file here. Okay, class slides. Well, you know what I'm going to do? When in doubt, go back to D-to-L, and I'm going to grab class 4, and I'm going to download this. Sorry for these extra steps, but I seem to have misplaced my PDF file. So I'll go ahead and put that there. Okay. It's in my my downloads directory. Okay. Sorry about those extra steps. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so we have done this step, and we're going to change directories. Oops, we've completed this step. We've completed this step. We've completed this step. And we've completed this step. Now we're on step 4 here, which is to type ant -f build DITA from XLIFF.xml. So let's do that. So I'll go back into my command line tool. Okay, so here I am. I was in the XLIFF-V2, so I will do a cd change directory space ... which will take me up a level. So now I'm just in the plugins directory. So now I'm going to say cd space DITA-XLIFF -V2, and I'm going to do a dir, and I'm going to see that the ant file that I'm interested in is build_DITA-XLIFF.xml. I must really like a lot of letters, because I sure do make my file names long. Okay, so I'm going to type ANT space -F space BUILD underscore DITA-FROM XLIFF.xml, and I will hit my enter key. And again, I'll get a lot of worrisome messages. I'm going to ignore those, but it said that it created the, it said build failed. How about that? The following line, build. Okay. D_X_translated.xml cannot be located. Okay, or read. Well, how do you like that? So this proves that this is actually a live demonstration. So I will see what's going on there. Maybe I didn't name it correctly. Sometimes that happens. DITA from XLIFF volume version 2 in. Oh, I certainly didn't. Okay, so it did exactly right. Okay, so I forgot to do my underscore translated. What do you know? It does what it's supposed to do. So I think that's right. That's the file name I'm looking for. D_X_translated.xml. So I will let me just double check the slides to make sure that that's correct. DIT, okay. Underscore translated. Okay, that is correct. Okay, so let's try that again. Here's a secret. With the DITA Open Toolkit, if you hit your up arrow, it'll give you the last command that you entered. So that's ant -F build DITA from XLIFF.xml. And I will hit the enter key again, and hopefully I'll get better results this time. Again, it gives me a whole bunch of processing that's going on, and if you stop to read these messages, sometimes you'll get distressed because it looks like it's bad news, but usually it's not. Okay, so now it got me that build successful, total time 14 seconds. Okay, so I'll put this away, and I will go back into my DITA from XLIFF, and I will look at my out directory and my samples and DITA from XLIFF, and it has a translated directory and a root directory, and I finally get to my sample DITA map with my tasks that are translated. So I'm going to pull up my text editor, and I'm going to look at one of these translated files, my tuning guitars file. I will look at it, and sure enough, there's my Z-ish. So everything was translated properly. So I'll put this away, and I will go back to my translated directory that shows me my root directory. Now I'm going to look at my instructions here again, and we've successfully done that translation. So now I'm going to observe the outputs, and I see that it is where I said it was going to be, and it is in Z-ish. So it says the next step is to copy the root directory. So I'm going to do that. So if I go to the root directory, and I'm going to highlight it, and in Windows I'm going to say Control-C. On the Mac I would say Command-C, and then it tells me to paste it into my DITA Open Toolkit directory. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to go back into my the root of my Open Toolkit, right where everything is located, and I'm going to, in Windows, say Control V for paste, and in Mac I would have said Command V, and it gave me my root directory right where I had expected it to be. Okay, change its name to Xlated. Okay, so I'm going to change the root directory's name to XLATED. Hopefully on the Mac you know how to do that. And here we are in Windows, so it's changed to Xlated. Okay, and then the next step is to page down, invoke the DITA Open Toolkit, which we already have. So I already have the DITA Open Toolkit going, and I'm going to type in DITA -I Xlated sample DITA map -F PDF -O Xlated out. Okay, that's a lot of letters, so I'm going to keep this up, and I'm going to pull up my command line prompt, and I'm going to type, I'm going to make sure that I'm in that, back into my root directory, so I'm going to say cd space ... and that got me back into my plugins directory, so then I'll say cd space ... and that got me back into my PSU DITA OT 2.2.0. And if I do a dir in Windows, I see that that's where I am. If I did a PWD in on the Apple, on the Mac, that's where I would be. So it's at this point that I need to type DITA space -I space XLATED slash SAMPLE dot DITAMAP space -F space PDF for my format space -O space XLATED OUT. Enter. It gives me this unable to locate tools jar. That's a benign warning. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay, so it probably didn't find some images, which is okay. If I were doing this properly, I would have copied the image directory into that root directory. But the fact that it gives me these warnings is okay. It's trying to find those image files, and then in the end it returned to my command prompt. So the instructions then say, to verify the compile. So I'm going to look into my Xlated out directory. Okay, and it did make the Xlated out, and I'm going to double click that, and I'm verifying that I have a PDF file, and I'm verifying that it made everything into Z-ish, which if we scroll down we see that there's Z-ish everywhere. Okay, so that's fine, good deal. So I'm going to close this file, and I'm going to go back into my directions, and I've verified that I had those results. So I'm going to zip those two directories and then send them to the instructor. What this left out was the requirement to create the XHTML, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that before I zip up those files, those directories. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my command prompt, and I'm going to hit my up arrow again, and I'm going to backspace over the PDF, and I'm going to write XHTML, and then space -O space XLATED OUT, enter. Again, it gives me that benign warning about unable to locate tools.jar, and also it's complaining that it can't find those images because I forgot to move those images over, but that's okay. And then at this point, in that same output directory, and right next to my PDF file, it created some HTML files. And if I look at these in the browser, what we see is that it created an index file, and each of these are linked to the Z-ish without the images because I forgot to put the image directory there. Okay, so that's that. And then the last step, it says, again, I'm going to refer to my instructions here. The last step, it says to select those two files, to zip those, and send them to the instructor. So I will grab those two directories, xlated and xlated out, and I will right-click, and I will say send to compressed folder. And it will create the zip file for me. That zip file, I noticed that some of you were having trouble sending the zip file to me via email or via D2L. So what you can do in that case then is you can get the zip file, and if you remove the zip extension, or in this case I'm just going to backspace under zip, ZIP, and make that TXT, enter, that will change the file format, or the file name to xlated.txt, but it's still a zip file. Go ahead and send that to me, and when I open it, I will convert it back into .zip, and everything will be fine. So hopefully that was all understandable, and you will understand how to complete your X1 deliverable. If you have any questions at all, please let me know, and I'll be happy to help. So on that note, thank you very much.